Lord God, I just thank you that your Son came down as a sacrifice and as an offering for us so that we can come into relationship with you, Lord.
When I survey the wondrous cross on which the Prince of Glory died, my richest gain I count but loss, and pour contempt on all my pride. Forbid it, Lord, that I should boast, save in the death of Christ my God. All the vain things that charm me most, I sacrifice them to his blood. See from his head, his hands, his feet, sorrow and love flow mingles down. Did such love and sorrow meet, or thorns compose so rich a crown? Were the whole realm of nature mine, that were an offering far too small. Love so amazing, so divine, demands my soul, my life, my all. Demands my soul, my life, my all.
Matthew 26, verse 26 to 30, the Last Supper. It's a passage where we see the disciples all gathered together for the last time. Now, they didn't know it was the last time, but as readers, we do. It was the last time that all 13 of them, the 12 disciples and Jesus, sat down at a table and they shared a meal. They shared a meal together as friends, as companions. It's the same meal where we get communion from. It's the meal where the bread was broken and the blood was shed in the juice. It's the meal where Jesus offered himself as a sacrifice. Now, the disciples didn't know this at the time, but we now know that that's what he was on about. His bread, the body, the cup, the blood, all to create this new covenant for us to come into as believers of Christ. It's one of those things that is so simple, the sharing of the meal, but something that's so powerful and so heartwarming and so true to the humanity of Jesus. And for me, that's a huge part of this message and this passage is we get to truly see Jesus' character and his kindness for those he holds close and his friends.
Coming to Easter, it makes me understand just the pain that Jesus went through. And he did that for me. Matthew 26, verses 36 to 41. And here Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane with his disciples. And he tells them to remain in one spot while he goes a little further on to pray. And he's deeply distressed. It says he's grieved to the point of death. And when he goes away to pray, he prays to God and he says, Lord, please take this away from me. Please don't make me have to go to my death. But not my will, but yours. And when he goes back to the disciples, he sees that they're asleep. To me, this passage mostly shows humanity. The humanity of Jesus and the humanity of the disciples. The humanity of Jesus because he was scared. He was scared to go to his death, and he was grieved to the point of death. And that's why he went and prayed to ask, Lord God, please take this cup from me. It makes Jesus seem relatable in a sense. Lord God, we want to thank you for this day. We want to thank you for this journey that we're having going into Easter, where we get to remember you and who you are and all that you've done for us. Thank you for all the grief that you went through for us.
About an hour later, another asserted, "Certainly this fellow was with him, for he is a Galilean." Peter replied, "Man, I don't know what you're talking about." Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word the Lord had spoken to him. "Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times." And he went outside and wept bitterly.
What I was thinking was that Peter was really close to Jesus, and it's a reminder to us that even if we are really close to Jesus, we can still be caught short and found wanting at times.
I guess maybe a situation like this for Peter in future has strengthened his will to be a real disciple, and he turned out to be a really strong follower of Jesus once in the early church, didn't he? And maybe this terrible experience for him caused him to feel he can use that to be even stronger in the future.
And as soon as it was morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council. And they bound Jesus and led him away and delivered him over to Pilate. And Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he answered him, "You have said so." And the chief priests accused him of many things, and Pilate asked again, "Have you no answer to make? See how many charges they bring against you." But Jesus made no further answer, so that Pilate was amazed. So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. Lord, for the times when we have, like the chief priests and the scribes and the Sanhedrin, stood in the way of people knowing who you are, we ask your forgiveness. Lord, for the times when we have, like Pilate, known that you are the King of the Jews, we have known your innocence, but we have allowed ourselves to be swayed by the crowd. We have wanted to be on their side. We ask your forgiveness. Lord Jesus, we thank you that you are the Saviour of the world and that you didn't defend yourself. You knew that you were going to go to the cross. Thank
I think that what's really interesting is the soldiers. They didn't believe that Jesus was God. They didn't believe that he was the king. They didn't believe all these things, and they kind of made fun of him, and they mocked him, and they did all these things. And it reminds me a lot about, actually, that's what a lot of the world think about Jesus. They mock him. They don't really take him all that seriously. But even though people do that, Jesus is still God, and Jesus still is king, and that gives me a lot of hope. There's this idea that Jesus is the king, and Pilate's not super convinced about it, although obviously we know he puts a sign above Jesus' head saying he is the king. And obviously the Pharisees and the temple officials and the priests, they straight out say, this man is not our king. And there's this whole deny, Jesus is not the king, Jesus is not the king. And certainly, in these stories, he doesn't look like a king. He's beaten and he's bleeding and he's weak, but he's still the king. And again, this idea of people can deny who Jesus is, but the truth is that he is our king. But it's interesting that Jesus as God is on his way to kind of fulfill his sort of ultimate mission, if you like, to come to earth, to die for our sin because he loved us so much. That was his mission. But to accomplish his mission, he needed a man, a person, to help him. And I think there's something in there, there's a lesson in there for the church. And when I say the church, I mean the church in the broadest sense of the word. We have that same mission, to not to die for the world, but to point people towards Jesus' love.
How deep the Father's love for us, how vast beyond all measure, that he should give his only Son to make a wretch his treasure. How great the pain of searing loss, the Father turns his face away, as wounds which mar the chosen one bring many a child to glory. Behold the man upon a cross, my sin upon his shoulders. Ashamed I hear my mocking voice call out among the scoffers. It was my sin that held him there until it was accomplished. His dying breath has brought me life. I know that it is finished. I will not boast in anything, no gifts, no power, no wisdom, but I will boast in Jesus Christ, his death and resurrection. Why should I gain from his reward? I cannot give an answer, but this I know with all my heart: his wounds have paid my ransom. Why should I gain from his reward? I cannot give an answer, but this I know with all my heart: his wounds have paid my ransom. dawn of the darkest day, Christ on the road to Calvary, tried by sinful men, torn and beaten, then nailed to a cross of wood. This the power of the cross. Christ became sin for us, took the blame, bore the wrath. We stand forgiven at the cross. Oh, to see the pain written on your face, bearing the awesome weight of sin. Every bitter thought, every evil deed, crowning your blood-stained brow. Now the daylight flees, now the ground beneath quakes as its maker bows its head. Curtain torn in two, dead raised to life, finish the victory cry. This the power of the cross. Christ became sin for us, took the blame, bore the wrath. We stand forgiven at the cross. It was early morning in the cold and dark prison cell, and I had not slept all night. It wasn't the yells of guards and prisoners that had kept me awake. It wasn't even the smells that stained the very walls of the room I was in, smells of fear and despair from many men before me. It was the knowledge that today I would die. As a child, I had sometimes wondered, as children do, what it would be like to die. But a child's thoughts quickly turned to other things, things more present. Now I knew what it felt like. Oh yes, now I knew. A cold weight sat in the pit of my stomach and would not go away. It was that which kept me awake. I had been hunched, curled up on the floor for more hours than I could remember, but finally I moved. Even condemned men have to move, I guess. Stiff muscles protesting with pain as I rose slowly to my feet. The other occupant of the cell didn't budge. Lying on the floor, the man's eyes gazed past me, never blinking, never shifting. I knew that it wasn't the cell walls he was seeing. He was looking through them to the small hill, not so far from where we both were, and to the crosses standing there. I had been haunted by the same image all night. As a young boy, I had sneaked out once to see a crucifixion. I wasn't supposed to. My dad had told me never to go to Golgotha, but death held a fascination for young boys, and so myself and two friends had made up some story, and we had gone. Slipping into the small crowd not far from the cross, I remember looking up at the man hanging there, bleeding and bruised, chest heaving as he gasped for the next breath. What had he done to earn this? I had wondered. Only the worst criminals ever got crucified. The murderers, the zealots, those Jews who tried to kick back against the hated Romans. The soldiers loved killing them. Was he one of these? I never found out, but I had nightmares for weeks. The sound of sandals on stone broke through these thoughts, and 2 Roman legionnaires appeared, one fumbling with keys and casting a bored eye at us. "On your feet, scum," he said, opening the door. The other came in and roughly kicked my cellmate to his feet, who obeyed as if in a daze. The soldier moved towards me and I didn't see the fist flying until it landed on the side of my head, sending me crashing against a wall. Pushing and punching, the soldiers herded us out of the cell and down the corridor into the courtyard. As we walked, I managed a glance at the bored faces of the soldiers and wondered how they could feel nothing when there was so much horror inside me. But for them it was just another day, I guess, just another job. In fact, they weren't even interested in us. They were talking about some other prisoner. "Did you hear they sentenced that guy Jesus last night?" one asked the other. "Wasn't he the one the Jewish bosses were after? I thought they weren't allowed to have trials at night." The first soldier laughed. "Jewish rules are made to be broken, even by the Jews, it seems." "What did they pin on him?" Not sure, something Jewish. We'll find out later on when the other squad brings him along to Skull Hill. He's going to be hanging along with these 2 today." The soldier glanced at me. "Congratulations, scum," he said. "You'll be dying with someone famous. Expect a crowd." Out in the courtyard we were met by the centurion, who looked us over coldly, and the rest of the execution squad. 2 other legionnaires carrying the tools of their gruesome trade. Shivers ran up my spine as I saw one with a large, crude hammer. I could almost feel the nails. I was pushed roughly onto my stomach and a large wooden crossbeam tied to my arms. A voice whispered in the back of my mind, "So it begins." Pulled to my feet and kicked into movement, I began the journey, each step a step closer to the cross. Pain has a funny way of changing time. The journey out to the city gates and beyond took forever, and took no time at all. We stumbled through streets already full of people. Some shouted abuse at us. Others quickly turned their heads away. I barely noticed. Each step was an agony as the beam grated against my back, which had been whipped to the bone only yesterday. The Romans have a great way of getting a message across. People who displeased them weren't dealt with quietly, they were made an advertisement. The place of the skull was as public as the Romans could make it. Criminals were crucified just outside the city gates, right next to the main road into Jerusalem, so that everyone walking past would see them and shudder. It was here that we eventually came to, Golgotha, the place of the skull. It was here with cold efficiency that I was crucified. Stripped of all clothing, nails were driven through my hands and feet. A rope was tied around my chest and the cross hoisted up and secured with ropes. And there I hung. Of course, everybody knows how the cross kills. Everybody knows that it's not the nails that kills you, it's the weight of your body pressing down on your lungs, suffocating you. As the lungs slowly fill with fluid, it becomes harder and harder to breathe. I had seen it before that day as a young boy. The crucified man, starved for oxygen, had spasmed his legs, pushing against the nails in his feet, pulling on the nails through each wrist, raising his body just to capture that one brief, precious breath, then collapsing in pain, only to do it again and again and again. Horrified, I had wondered as a small boy how breathing could be worth it. And now I knew. The body does not let a man give up on life so easily. And so as the hot sun began to rise in the sky, my dance began. I saw my cellmate on the other cross mirror my movements. Through my pain, somehow I still managed to think. My thoughts turned to God, as they sometimes do in these situations. I had known him once. I had even loved him, I guess. I don't know what happened. Maybe disappointments. Maybe I lost interest. I just don't know. All I knew now is that I needed him. Needed him more than I needed my next breath. But he would not come. I know that. The book of my life did not make for especially pleasant reading, filled as it was with chapters of sin. The place of the skull was the last place God would be found in. Suddenly there was a commotion. In my pain, I hadn't noticed how large the crowd had become. But now everywhere I looked, I saw people. I could even see a group of temple rulers close by, strutting around looking important. What were they doing here? A man was suddenly pushed through the crowd and fell to the dirt. I could see the whip marks on his back, blazing an angry red. Someone, a soldier probably, had twisted together some thorn branches into a circle and pushed it down hard on his head, and blood flowed freely. Could this be the mysterious Jesus? What had he done to deserve this? Why had the rulers come to see him die? I looked hard at the man as he was stripped naked, positioned on the lying cross and impaled. Clang, clang, clang. Cold iron punched its way through bone into the wood. He didn't seem that bad. In fact, there was something about him. Why did it seem as if he was in control and not the soldiers? And when the cross was raised into place, why did something in my heart sing, higher? Lift him higher. He deserves to be higher. As the cross swung into place, I saw the sign above the bleeding head. This is the King of the Jews. And do you know, hanging from my nails beyond all reason or thought, somehow I knew it was true. In that moment, Jesus turned his head and looked at me, and it was like unexpectedly finding a peaceful place in the centre of a storm. But the storm continued around him, and I realized he was the magnet for it all. The rulers laughed and called out, "He saved others. Let him save himself if he is the Christ of God, the chosen one. Ha! You can't do it, can you?" The soldiers walked up to the base of his cross, and with voices dripping with sarcasm said, "If you are the King of the Jews, save yourself. Come on." And suddenly, my fellow prisoner, only meters away, turned his head towards Jesus, and with all the pain and hatred that had been building up in him, screamed, "Aren't you the Christ? Save yourself. Better still, save us." Jesus didn't move. He didn't say a word, but he hung there, accepting it all, bearing it all, as if somehow those words belonged to him. But something inside me broke loose. Jesus the Christ would have one friend this day. With laboured breath, I called to the other criminal, "Don't you fear God? You are under the same sentence. You and me deserve this. Can't you see this man has done nothing wrong?" And slowly, Jesus lifted his head and looked directly at me. "Jesus," I said, "remember me when you come into your kingdom." And summoning the breath to speak, Jesus replied, "I tell you the truth. Today you will be with me in paradise." In that moment, I knew I had got it wrong. Not even the place of the skull was safe from the love and the mystery and the presence of God.
Why did the earth tremble and shake when it was stained at Calvary, stained by the blood that fell from the face of Jesus on the cross. Didn't there tremble beneath such a weight as Jesus carried our sin? These things I wonder as I behold the place where mercy begins. Why did the sun cover its face and turn away from Calvary? As there in the darkness, there in my place, I'm Jesus on the cross. Could it not witness the light of the world suddenly flicker and dim? These things I wonder as I behold the place where mercy begins. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Once I was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. It was this grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did this grace appear the hour I first believed. Why was the curtain then torn in two? Because of the death at Calvary. Was it to bid every broken heart to the Savior on the cross? For Jesus said if he be lifted up, he'd draw all people to him. And so I've come, and I bow down in this place where mercy begins. Though I have traveled so far from your side and fallen so deeply in sin, here by your grace, Lord, I will abide in this place where mercy begins. Jesus Christ, I think upon your sacrifice. You became nothing, poured out to death. Many times I've wondered at your gift of life, and I'm in that place once again. I'm in that place once again. And once again I look upon the cross where you died. I'm humbled by your mercy and I'm broken inside. Once again I thank you. Once again I pour out my life. Now you are exalted to the highest place, King of the heavens, where one day I'll bow. But for now, I'll marvel at the saving grace, and I'm full of praise once again. I'm full of praise once again. And once again I look upon the cross where you died. I'm humbled by your mercy and I'm broken inside. Once again I thank you. Once again I pour out my life. Thank you for the cross. Thank you for the cross. Thank you for the cross, my friend. Thank you for the cross. Thank you for the cross. Thank you for the cross, my friend. And once again I look upon the cross where you died. I'm humbled by your mercy and I'm broken inside. Once again I thank you. Once again I pour out my life. Once again I look upon the cross where you died. I'm humbled by your mercy and I'm broken inside. Once again I thank you. Once again I pour out my life.